Hello there, friends, and welcome. Before any of you comment, I'm going to get it out of the way immediately. This plaster is because I was viciously assaulted by my toddling daughter, who decided that Daddy trying to have a nap on the sofa was not on, and so she came up to me and smacked me in the face with a wooden brick. I am fine. My entire left side of my forehead was swollen, but now I've simply got a Looney Tunes cartoonish red lump on my forehead that I thought I would save you all the displeasure of having to look at for this entire video, so hence the plaster. But besides that, time to get onto the subject. So everybody should know that in South Africa things do not go great for the Boers, who are the remnants of the people who used to rule that country, which ended when apartheid ended back in the 1990s. Nelson Mandela took over and a new wave of harmony, racial, economic, prosperity, and democracy was started, right? That's how the narrative goes. Apartheid and white rule in South Africa ended, and everything went great from there, right? No, that's absolutely not what happened. And as a result of what actually happened, the South African Boers are being granted refugee status in America because it's very highly debated whether it's the right term to use, but many allege that there is a genocide against the South African Boers going on in South Africa itself. There is a separatist community called Orania, which is a Boer-specific territory. It's a small town, one of the only prosperous and functioning parts of South Africa, which is even now still under threat. I think there was a Channel 4 documentary on it last year where they sent a disabled ethnic minority to Orania, basically to struggle session them and tell them how terrible and discriminatory it was that they just wanted their own little community where they could mind their own business and live decent lives. That's besides the point, though. So the first Afrikaners have arrived in US under a radically redrawn refugee program. Now, the number, I've seen two different numbers quoted on this, which is either 49 or 59. Either way, very small number to begin with. So the Afrikaners have arrived in the US at Dulles International Airport, and there has been a wave of controversy over this, not least because of the fact that Donald Trump put a massive nationwide pause on international refugee schemes, I think back in January, but in February signed through the order that allowed it so that the Afrikaners, the Boers, whatever you want to call them, were able to take refugee status in the US and travel there instead. Now again, the reason for this is simple, which is that there is a huge persecution of particularly white South Africans going on, the Boers in particular, and the farmers, where there has been widespread murders of farmers that go on there. So you've got articles like this from December of 2023 in The Spectator talking about this, where number of killings is worrying. Last year, that would be 2022, there were more than 300 farm attacks and 50 murders. Now the farms, I think, of the domestic food production in South Africa produce about 95 or 96%, massively owned by white South Africans, the Boers, and the other South Africans do not take kindly to this. They see this as a holdover of the apartheid regime. They see this as an unfair distribution of land and resources because as it goes the magic soil, you get on the soil and it magically becomes productive because the soil is magic. It doesn't matter what kind of people are tending to the soil. That's what they think, that if they appropriate all of this land, that they will be able to make it just as productive as the Boers have made it, which they will not. They absolutely will not. Now, this also goes on to say that there is a lot of dispute about whether the term genocide is appropriate against the Boers. Personally, I think that it is because the intention is certainly there, even if the means to commit it is not. But even outside of the specific discrimination against Boers in South Africa, the country just seems like a very unpleasant place to live. There are lots of accounts on Twitter and accounts elsewhere that you can find on the internet that just show the difference between South Africa even 15 years ago to what it is today. Infrastructure is crumbling. People literally dig up the paved roads so that they can take the concrete and use it for other resources or just sell it off. The tarmac, I should say. It is a terrible place. In 2019, there was something between 19,000 and 21,000 murders in South Africa. Now, South Africa has a population size that's similar to the UK, but the homicide rate in South Africa is actually larger than that in the US, which has, 3 or 4 times the population of South Africa. So that just goes to show what a dangerous country it is to live in, especially when the government is explicitly against the white population there. This was something very controversial earlier this year, where Cyril Ramaphosa signed in an expropriation law where it was a expropriation without compensation law. So basically the government says that at any point in time it can claim that your land needs to be appropriated by the government, and they can seize it without giving you any compensation for it. So it's the Gibbs law. It's the Gibbs me that law. They say, we want your land because it is productive, we are going to steal that land from you. And then when the government has it, the same thing happened in Zimbabwe, formerly Rhodesia. All of the white farmers will leave, and then the land will no longer be productive, and then they will be begging for the farmers to come back. And there's even worse than this, because this is just the theft. This is just a government signing into a law that we can steal your land because we hate you, and we hate what you represent, and we hate the legacy of apartheid and colonialism and white supremacy, or whatever it is that the Boers, who are the descendants of those people, but mostly probably not the people themselves. The Boers are being charged with all sorts of crimes due to their ancestors' actions. Then there's this very, very famous one. This is a rally featuring Julius Malema, well, led by Julius Malema. You can see that there are thousands of people in this audience. Julius Malema is the head of the Economic Freedom Party, or something like that. And they are the 4th largest party in South Africa. And in this video, he is getting the entire crowd to chant along, saying, "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer, pop, pop." Which, I don't know about you, but if I was a white South African seeing that the 4th largest party in the country is being led by a man who explicitly wants to kill me, I would say that constitutes genocidal intent. Because if this was any other race, any other group of people, a party like this, calling for those kinds of actions, would not be able to be in Parliament. There would be banned. There would be a blanket ban of this kind of party if it was against Jews, if it was against Arabs, if it was against people of a particular religion, if it was against Africans or any other different ethnic groups. It's only permitted against white people, which is why there is this dispute over whether genocide is the proper term to use for what's being done to the Boers. And you can see what's being done to the Boers as well. Here is a video where they are showing all of these crosses are white farmers that have been murdered. And it goes on and on and on. And this action is just tolerated by larger society in South Africa, because South Africa isn't a real society anymore. It's not a civilization. It's not a culture. It is a failed nation. And that is what people are trying to defend, and that is why these Boers are being given refugee status. I think it is perfectly fine. Not only do they actually deserve it, if they're going to America, they will much more easily be able to assimilate into the culture. They will be much more grateful than the other kinds of refugees that the rest of the West is saddled with. Now, of course, given that they are white, given that they are productive and useful members of society, a lot of people have problems with them being given refugee status, because to many people on the left, and even those in the centre and the centre-right as well, who don't have, who have principles, but their principles only apply to particular people, they decide that this means that they are not real refugees. The only kinds of refugees that there are people who are not white. The Guardian decided to, in their article talking about this, say that the idea that there is a genocide in South Africa was a far-right conspiracy theory that's being amplified by Elon Musk, who is, of course, himself a white South African, although not Boer. He's of English descent, by what he has told people publicly. And they want to amplify that this is a far-right conspiracy theory. There's no truth to this. Ignore the fourth biggest party in the country screaming that they want to murder all of the white South Africans. Ignore the fact that the government signed into law a bill that allows them to steal these white South Africans' land at any time of their choosing. Ignore all of the many documented cases of brutal murders of farmers in South Africa and the targeting of the farmers in South Africa, because apparently these people don't know where food comes from. Now, ignore that. It's only the far right, the evil boogeymen, who would want you to believe that such a thing is possible. Then the ANC, who are the majority party in the South African parliament right now, released this statement where they were saying that they were rejecting the falsehood of Afrikaner refugees, where it's highlighted here by Charlie Kirk, where they say what the instigators of this falsehood seek is not safety, but impunity from transformation. They flee not from persecution, but from justice, equality, and accountability for historic privilege. And what that transformation is the transformation of South Africa from, yes, a discriminatory society, but one that worked and one that could lay claim to be a functioning culture and civilization, to a differently discriminating society which is completely dead. It is a dead country. It is a failed nation. They also go on to say here, the misuse of refugee protection to shield right-wing anti-transformation elements is a violation of the spirit and letter of international law, which is a very interesting thing to say because it seems to imply that the very purpose of international law as it was set up after the Second World War and as it has developed to the present day is purely to help left-wingers and to help transformational elements. And what those transformational elements, again, are to make sure that as many non-white people can enter white countries as possible. That's what it appears to me, at the very least. The Episcopal Church of America, which had grants and status with the federal government that would help resettle refugees coming into the country, have said that they will not, because apparently the Christian thing to do is to not help white people because they're racist. Then you get the further people who are collaborators, I would say. These are white South Africans themselves who want to virtue signal and say things like, every white South African is racist. This is Peter Creel. We were built by apartheid by design. Whatever you think of the morality of that, South Africa, if you go back 60 years ago to the 1960s, looks like a pleasant and functional country. It certainly does not look like that today. He says, you don't grow out of that. You unlearn it painfully. Having black friends doesn't fix it. Again, this is while Boers are being purposefully targeted by the government for not only expropriation, but annihilation by certain parties within the government, that being, again, Julius Malema. This man thinks that the way to save himself from this is to get on his knees and beg forgiveness. He says in this little video that what actually needs to happen is that white South Africans need to become uncomfortable, which means that you need to have your historic country, which was, again, it was established by the Dutch and then the English, and there was a lot of war going on there as well. But eventually, the people who are of Dutch ancestry, the Boers themselves, they can trace their families back, 500 years in South Africa, 500, 600, I'm not exactly sure how many centuries it is, but they have been there for centuries. They set up the country of South Africa. Before Europeans got there, it was a big load of unused land where there were a few roving tribes on it. It was not what you would call a country. It was the Europeans that arrived and settled the land that set up the country. So this is a collaborator, as far as I'm concerned, somebody who doesn't care about his his countrymen. He only cares about bowing down and virtue signaling to the people who want him dead. It's not going to make them stop wanting you dead, mate. You get other collaborators saying, wonderful, bye Afrikaner refugees. May your American dream keep you too busy to weigh in on South Africa. No opinions, no nostalgia, no back home in South Africa, this and that. Don't at us, don't comment, delete your fake accounts on you. So this is, again, this is just gloating over how bad a situation it's got in parts of South Africa that it needs to come to this, and then saying, oh, you hate what's been done to your country? You hate what's been done to your country and you don't think it's right, and so you're having to leave? Well, sucks to be you. That's the attitude here, which is completely ridiculous because, mate, it's going to happen to you too. If you think that you're safe and privileged, because ironically enough, all of this virtue signaling comes from a place of great privilege that you haven't yet been affected by the disasters in South Africa, it's going to get to you eventually, mate. You're not safe. And sadly, this is the same fate that awaits a lot of Western countries if we don't stem the flow of third world immigration into our countries as soon as possible, right now, preferably. Everywhere will become South Africa, because when you import these populations and their cultures, you will become them if they overwhelm you in sheer numbers, as happened in South Africa. There are Americans who are, the white liberals who want to virtue signal by just calling all of these people racist. Again, I've met Boers, and they were probably on the more liberal side, but in my town there's a lovely cafe that's owned by some white South Africans who moved here some years ago. They're lovely people. They're lovely people, and just saying that they're racist is just an insult at this point, but it's a completely meaningless insult. It doesn't stop what's happening to them, and it doesn't make it right. So this is virtue signaling. Then you get people who, I looked for this. This has been deleted now. But this person, AJ Delgado, has MAGA. So she's supposedly MAGA, but she's of Cuban origin, or at least partial Cuban origin. And she said, just heard on NPR that 50,000 white South Africans are due to arrive soon. Complete typo, complete misunderstanding. It was between 49 and 59. Again, the reporting has differed on the number, so I'm going to say 59. After being granted refugee visa protection, most of these folks are upper middle class or wealthy. Funny how he isn't, this is Trump I assume, concerned about immigration from the right types. Well, yes, again, whether they're upper middle class or wealthy, it doesn't mean that they're not in danger in South Africa, given how violent and crime-ridden it is and how there are political parties targeting them. Also, yeah, if you are of the right type, that being a person with a background and a culture that means that you will easily assimilate into the country, well, that's a much better reason to allow you to grant you status in the US than a lot of the so-called refugees that end up there. Liberals in America are basically just saying the quiet part out loud, saying that, yeah, we just don't want them here because they're white. Refugees are when they're not white. If they are white, that makes them colonizers, racists, perpetuators of historical oppression. Any of these buzzwords, when really what they just mean is we don't want white people coming to the country, because the whole point of multiculturalism is to make places less white. That's what diversity is our strength means. It just means your ancestors who built this country were wrong for doing so, and we need to take it from you. As the descendants of those ancestors, you are tainted with historical sin, so we need to take it from you, because European nations' success has been the great sin of the globe. Ignore all of the culture, ignore all of the industry, ignore all of the progress that we've made, ignore everything that we've done to improve the world. The fact that you are more successful than non-European cultures means that you have to go. You have to be reduced to a minority in your own homelands. This is including the fact that globally, people of European descent are already a global minority. I believe we make up about 8% of the global population, which is very worrying when even within our own homelands, we are becoming less and less of a percentage of the total population. You have people like this, not your traditional refugee exodus, and they're just pointing out it's because, oh, look, there's actual women and children. Look, there's actual children. So they're actually refugees. This man's a bit fat. Well, he's quite fat, actually. So he can't be a refugee because despite probably being farmers, refugees are when you are fighting age men who are in fit shape. That's when you're refugees. Also not white. They're not allowed to be refugees if there are actual women and children. Then you have the seething. Again, this is just the same statement again, basically, looking like they haven't struggled a day in their life. That's a hell of an assumption to make. What, because they're not fat? Because they're not fighting age men? Because they don't have a violent, dead look in their eyes? Because they look grateful to be there? Look at them all carrying their American flags. Is that why they haven't struggled a day in their life? Because they might be grateful and they might be able to fit in when they get to America? And this is Azealia Banks, who is a rap artist, although I think artist is being far, far too kind. She says they all look effing retarded. Okay, that's... no, they don't actually. They really don't, especially given that... I feel like you might be, in your appearance here, Azealia, attempting to, shall we say, appropriate European beauty standards. But that's neither here nor there. And then you have the other MAGA types, or the centrist, conservative, Christian types, who, again, of interesting background. Neil Shenvi saying here, the South African refugee situation is a good opportunity for everyone to demonstrate their ideological consistency, saying that, well, you know, Trump said no refugees, but he's going to allow refugees who are actually in danger and come from a culture that means they can fit into America when they get here. That's not very consistent with you. Oh, well, I don't care about what you think of my ideological consistency, Neil Shenvi. As I've pointed out, people of European descent are a global minority in the world. And when you see what's happened to South Africa and you see what is being done to the people of South Africa, personally, I think it's a time for a bit of solidarity. I'm not going to abandon these people to be persecuted, their land stolen from them, and murdered in their own homes. I don't think that's right. And whether you think that's ideologically consistent of people or not doesn't really matter, because what you're advocating for, if you're saying that it's ideologically consistent to allow to force these people to stay, is for, again, the persecution of a hated minority in a country that they built, again. And Matt Walsh, who, you know, I disagreed with him on his Star Wars tape, but he's been really, really strong on this particular subject recently. He uses a phrase here that I can't say, so instead I'm going to say, read it like this. The big switcheroo is real. If you had any doubt, this story about the South African refugees should clear it up for you. The left wants unchecked third world migration because they want to make America, I would also say as well, Europe and any other country built by European people, less white. That's it. It's that simple. It's why they oppose white refugees, because white refugees defeat the whole purpose of the program. Again, it is to transform you. The whole point of multiculturalism, diversity is our strength, is to make sure that your country is less white, less European, and more like the rest of the world. And guess what I see when I see the rest of the world? I see countries that do not function. I see dead nations, failed states. I see places with no infrastructure, no community, and rampant crime and murder. I don't want that. I tell you what I could do with, though, if I was America and had a refugee scheme, as they do, is a few well-meaning, kind, persecuted boors, farmers who will be productive and add to society rather than detract from it. And so I support Donald Trump allowing white South Africans to enter America. I think you should too. And again, I think we all need some solidarity in what is a very dangerous time in our history.